Chapter 185. The Emperor and Empress's expression was uncertain. If Prince Yu was involved at this time, it would not be that simple. At the male side of the banquet, Shin Xiao and Shan Xian looked at each other. Shin Xian was still all right and was somewhat stunned by the matter, but Shan Xiao secretly clenched his fists. Previously, Shin Miao did not dare to tell him who was the person who raped Shin Qing, but now everything was clear. No wonder Shin Miao was unwilling to say. It was Prince Yu of the first rank. Once he thought that if it was not for Shan Miao's good luck, the one who would end up in Shin Qing's situation would be his own younger sister. Shin Xiao's heart gave birth to a melancholy feeling. Prince Yu did not admit it, but also did not deny it. As such, it could almost be confirmed. Everyone looked at Shin Qing with sympathy and pity. Prince Yu of the first rank had always liked to use various means to secretly abduct young females, and even dared to touch the daughter of an official. Now the unlucky person was coincidentally Shan Qing. In the silence, Shun Miao's voice rang softly. No wonder His Highness the First Rank proposed to marry the Shun family's young lady. So it was to give eldest sister a status. These words were light, but it made everyone present to be enlightened. No wonder it was like this. Just now Prince Yu of the First Rank said that he wanted to marry a Wang Fei and was interested in the Shin family's young lady. So it was actually Shin Qing, and now there was even a child. In a moment, the gaze that looked at Shan Qing changed. As such, it did not seem that Prince Yu was forcing her, but Shin Qing was willing to be a Wang Fei. This fifth Shin young lady is very powerful, Su Mingfeng said in surprise. The ability to invert black and white is also extremely high. Most of the people were led by the nose, but it did not represent everyone. Those who were clear-minded could still remember that when Prince Yu of the First Rank said that he wanted to marry the Shun family's young lady, he was looking at Shun Miao. Xie Jingxing crossed his arms and looked at the purple-clad young female opposite him with a smile that was not a smile. One did not know when it started, but everyone at the palace banquet was led by the nose by Shin Miao. Now that things had developed to this stage, it was all within her calculations. And it was not that there was no danger in this. She was bold enough to gamble, and her moves were accurate. She took everyone's reactions into account and played a good move. Since it was so, he did not mind adding fuel to the fire. Immediately Xie Jingxing also said, "It is good to have affection and righteousness." The emperor's brows wrinkled imperceptibly. One had to know that even though Prince Yu of the First Rank would mess around in the past, he would not bring these matters to the stage. No matter how it was in private, there would always be a way to solve it, but to place it in public, to punish this imperial younger brother? One was afraid that Prince Yu's heart would be filled with resentment, and this matter would be forgotten. When the emperor shielded like this and followed the example of the subordinates, it would not be able to awe the officials. As for Shin Miao and Xie Jingxing's words, it was a very good idea. If it was said that these two people were in love with each other, there was nothing wrong with it. He looked at the Empress, and the Empress understood and said, "So the young lady that royal brother mentioned was the young lady of the Shan family. But both of you are too reckless. And causing such a big disaster. What would happen in the future?" Shin Qing's heart heaved a sigh of relief. Ignoring the pain in her abdomen, she crawled up and knelt on the ground to kowtow and pleaded, "It is all this official's daughter's fault, but this official's daughter cannot bear to part with the flesh and blood in her abdomen. I beseech your majesty and your ladyship to look at the child in this official's daughter's abdomen and spare this official's daughter this time." Booing sounds rang out. This time Shin Qing did not have any dignity at all and only lost her face. The Empress also looked at her with disgust but said lightly, "It is difficult to escape the blame. But since today is the returning banquet, it is a happy event, and imperial younger brother has been a widower for so many years, so Bengong will do a good deed today. Giving the two of you a marriage bestowed upon you is also a golden marriage." Shin Qing managed to keep her life and quickly said with joy, "Thanking your majesty and thanking your ladyship." She did not know how shameful her actions were in the eyes of others. In the past, Shin Qing only said that Shin Miao could not be seen in public, but now Shin Qing herself had become the daughter of the Shin family that could not be seen in public. Prince Yu of the First Rank looked at Shin Qing darkly before his eyes turned and landed on Shin Miao. Sitting high up, the emperor stared at him with a warning stare, and Prince Yu of the First Rank could only cup his hands and slowly said, "Thanking Imperial Older Brother and Imperial Saw for fulfilling my wish." It was just that only the person involved knew the chill in those words. The corner of Shun Miao's lips rose as she looked at Prince Yu fearlessly. In that pair of clear eyes, there was a look of joy, but there was a trace of fierceness hidden in that joy, as if it was a ferocious beast. Today was only the opening dish, and the real thing that was left for Prince Yu residence was still at the back. To clear all the plans that Prince Yu had planned in front of him, presumably at this moment Prince Yu's heart was already extremely furious. When one was angry, it was most easy to make mistakes, and this mistake was like the wrong moves on the chessboard. Taking advantage of the victory to pursue and destroy the pawns and chariots, one would be able to win very quickly. She tilted her head and her eyes were abnormally bright, but if one looked carefully at the smile on her lips, there was a kind of chilling terror. It has begun. Prince Yu of the first rank. Chapter 186. A proper homecoming banquet had ended in this sudden turn of events. Emperor Wen Hui's mood was disturbed, and not long after, he flicked his sleeves, and the Empress also said that she was tired. Since the Emperor and Empress had left, the officials naturally knew that they could not stay for long, and one after another found excuses to leave. Even though today's matter seemed to have found a perfect ending with the eldest young lady of the Shen family marrying into Prince Yu residence, but those with discerning eyes knew that it was a shocking scandal. As for that eldest young lady of the Shen family, once she marries into Prince Yu residence, it would naturally bode ill rather than well. Luo Shuiyin held Shan Miao's hands tightly. She did not know how Shenqing and Prince Yu would have an affair, but because of this she was more worried about Shen Miao's safety. She only felt that the danger in the Ding capital was no less than the northwest desert. Shen Xiao did not say a word until he left. He had always been cheerful, and it made Shen Xian think that he was feeling sad because of Shenqing's matter. But he did not know that Shen Xiao's heart was already extremely angry and felt that he had nowhere to vent his anger. He hated the Shen family's second household for being vicious and also hated Prince Yu's shamelessness. Shenqing had long been brought away by Ren Wanyuan in a hurry, but Shun Gui's expression was very interesting and everyone looked at him with meaningful eyes. Some colleagues who did not get along with him in court even threw stones at him when he was down. They cupped their hands and smiled. Congratulations to Shendarin. To be able to become in-laws with His Highness Prince Yu is a great blessing. If it was in the past when Shenqing married Prince Yu, it would not be a big deal to Shen Gui. As long as it could help his career, his daughter's happiness was not important. But now, Shenqing's performance had obviously brought trouble to Prince Yu. Would Prince Yu vent his anger on him? As he thought about it, Shen Gui's heart gave birth to some irritation and fear. After the returning banquet dispersed, Luo Shuiyin and Shen Miao walked out of the palace, and when they passed by a corridor, Shen Miao softly reminded her, "Be careful. There is a loose brick here." Luo Shuiyin was a military general, and her steps were big and heavy. If one step was taken, one might stumble. Luo Shuiyin took a careful look before smiling, almost fell. Then she was surprised and looked at Shen Miao. How did Zhao Zhao know? Shen Miao choked. She had lived in the palace for decades and had long remembered what it was like. When Luo Shuiyin asked, she could only reply, "1 year I tripped here, and since then I've remembered it." "I see." Luo Shuiyin laughed heartily. Zhao Zhao is quite smart. She remembers the places where she fell, so she won't fall again. Shen Miao's heart moved, but she did not speak. As the two of them walked, they saw two people who looked like guards dragging a young eunuch past. The young eunuch's mouth was stuffed with a handkerchief, and he seemed to be struggling with all his might. However, how could he struggle free from the tall and strong guards? Following behind them was the head eunuch, Eunuch Gao. "Shun Foreign, Shun Young Miss." Eunuch Gao stopped and greeted them. "Eunuch Gao, this is..." Luo Shuiyin looked at the little eunuch and asked. "The newcomer doesn't know the rules and made a mistake. I'm taking him to be punished," Eunuch Gao said with a sharp voice. When that young eunuch saw Shen Miao, his eyes landed on Jingzhe, who was behind Shen Miao, and suddenly struggled like crazy, as if he wanted to rush to Jingzhe's side. "Be more honest." Eunuch Gao kicked the young eunuch's knee, and the latter gave a muffled grunt before kneeling down. Eunuch Gao snorted from his nose, "Thing that does not know the immensity of heaven and earth," almost offended a noble person. Luo Shuiyin frowned. She did not like these inhumane punishments in the palace, and this kind of scene would make her heart uncomfortable. She immediately said to Eunuch Gao, "Since that is the case, one will not disturb Eunuch Gao's work." Chapter 187. Gao Gonggong quickly responded with a smile. It was Shun Miao who suddenly opened her mouth and softly said, "Since one has committed a mistake, naturally one should be punished." Everyone looked at her strangely, and the little eunuch's body trembled as he looked at Shun Miao with a trace of resentment. Shin Miao did not bother about it, and pulled Luo Shuiyin to leave. Before leaving, she lightly said, "If one does not know the rules, then one must be taught. The palace cannot be compared to the outside, and today is different from the past." As Shin Miao and Entourage's figures gradually went further away, Gao Gonggong said to the two guards, "What are you waiting for? Let's go." Xiao Lizi's heart was filled with unwillingness, and his face was filled with fear. He did not know what he had done wrong. In the little garden of the returning banquet, Shun Miao's personal maid Jing, she gave him an ingot of silver and said to her that eldest Shun young lady was not feeling well and did not drink the wine prepared for the palace banquet. She only needed a cup of clear lotus tea and would have to trouble her to make an exception during the banquet. He felt that this matter was very simple and he could obtain an ingot of silver, so why not? Moreover, if he could please this young lady of the Shin family, perhaps there would be a benefactor in the future. But no matter how Xiao Lizi calculated, he did not expect that Shen Qing was actually pregnant, and that clear lotus tea became the main culprit that triggered everything. It could be said that that cup of clear lotus tea caused a disaster, and the source of this cup of tea, after investigating, was traced back to him. Xiao Lizi explained countless of times, but no one believed his words, and the silver that he received was the most common silver, not even the official silver. How would a noble young lady use this kind of common silver as a reward? No one believed his words, and he was a wicked person. What was waiting for him? Outside, Shun Miao was quietly walking. She was clearer than anyone about what was waiting for Xiao Lizi. The palace was a place where it was easy to invert black and white. If one stood high, one would have the ability to turn black into white, and if one was originally very short, then one would be sorry as the white would become black. In the beginning, when Fu Xiu-yi just ascended the throne, Xiao Lizi was Gao Gonggong's dog that came and went at his beck and call. It was she who pitied Xiao Lizi and was willing to give him face in the palace. Later, Xiao Lizi became eunuch Li, and she became a deposed empress. This eunuch that she had personally promoted even personally sent her on her last journey and gave her a piece of advice. Today is different from the past. Now, she could be considered to have returned those words back to him. This life was different from the past. Now, she was the daughter of the first wife of a high and mighty official, while the other party was just a lowly speck of dust. She didn't even bother to waste too much energy on him. This was a clean and efficient way, which was very good. She and Luo Shuiyin walked in front, but did not know that behind the winding corridors, there was someone looking at her back and sighing. Does this young lady of the Shin family have enmity with that little eunuch? For no reason at all, a life was lost. Beside him, Xie Jingxing sneered at him. When did you become compassionate? A doctor should have the heart of a parent. Gao Yang waved his fan and suddenly thought of something. His expression became serious as he said, "The young lady of the Shin family is not simple. Just now in the hall, she looked at me for a long time. Could it be that she discovered my identity? Impossible. Then the way she looked at me was really scary." Gao Yang touched his chin and seriously thought for a while before speaking. Could it be that she is pleased with me? Xie Jingxing stared at him without any expression and spat out a word, "Scram." "You are really not interesting." Gao Yang shook his head in regret. "Even though the important matter is pressing, but your temper is getting fiercer and fiercer. It is better to relax." Xie Jingxing looked far away and said, "Yu Shu is here?" "What?" Gao Yang was surprised. "When?" Chapter 188. Yesterday. Gao Yang's expression gradually turned solemn. "Could it be that you want to correct? Ding Capital, Shin Residence, Kai Yun Yuan." With a paw slap, a clear finger mark appeared on Shun Qing's face, and her lips turned red. "Xingui, what are you doing?" Ren Wanyun shouted in a stern voice and protected Shen Qing in her bosom while looking at Shen Gue with a fierce look in her eyes. What am I doing? Shen Gue's smile was sinister like a wolf. If it was not for the trace of sentiments, he would really want to kill the two people in front of him. He said, "What did you do today?" "What?" Ren Wanyun was not to be outdone. "Can this matter be blamed on Qinger? You are Qinger's father, and you do not help your own daughter and still hit her. Shen Gue, you have no conscience." "Daughter?" Shen Gue laughed in anger. Shen Gue do not have such a daughter. Shameless and flirt around. Also pregnant with a vile spawn. Really not even comparable to the prostitutes in the brothel. Shen Qing's body trembled violently, and her pair of eyes were somewhat blurry. When Ren Wanyun saw this, her heart felt like it was being stabbed by a knife. If Shen Gue had a trace of father-daughter relationship with Shen Qing, he would not use such vicious words to talk about his own daughter. Ren Wanyun handed Shen Qing over to Chun Tao and stood up with a sneer. "Shen Gue, touch your conscience and ask yourself, for Qing to be like this today, who is the one who harmed her? Is it me? It is Shen Miao, that little slut. Why do you not go and find trouble with Shen Miao? Oh, you are afraid. You are afraid that when eldest brother and eldest Saw return, you will not be able to touch that little slut. You are angry at Qi, but don't forget that you also had a part in the matter at Wulong Temple. Now you have to take good care of yourself and push everything to Qing, and me. This old woman will not fall for your tricks. If you provoke me, I will tell the matter to eldest brother and eldest Saw, and none of us will be able to gain anything." Shen Gue had been husband and wife with Ren Wanyun for many years, but had never seen Ren Wanyun acting like a shrew. What made him feel uneasy was that Ren Wanyun actually used this matter to threaten him. Even though Shen Gue was a slick person, he was extremely timid, and this could be seen from how he did not dare to provoke Prince Yu. Now that Shen Xian and wife had returned to the residence, he dared not find trouble with Shen Miao. If Ren Wanyun really dared to divulge this matter, Shen Gue believed that Shen Xian would chop him in half. Thinking of this, Shen Gue said angrily, "You shrew, you are so unreasonable. Even if I told you, I wouldn't be able to explain myself. I'm leaving." With that, he fled. Looking at the back view of Shen Gue leaving in a hurry, Ren Wanyun's face was filled with ridicule. She knew her husband the best. Shen Gue was a person who bullied the weak and feared the strong. Marrying such a person, now she could not even protect her daughter. There was no doubt that Shen Miao had given Ren Wanyun a fatal blow. To Ren Wanyun, it was more painful to see her own daughter step by step towards destruction than to kill her. At this point, with the Empress bestowing marriage, no matter how capable Ren Wanyun was, she would not be able to change anything. "Shen Miao, this debt, Ren Wanyun will not settle it with you and swear that I am not a human." She gritted her teeth until her lips bled. In the western courtyard, after Shen Xian and wife returned to their own room, Shen Xiu was still sitting there without moving. He had a wooden face as he sat in front of Shen Miao's table like a door god. This young general usually looked like a spring breeze, but once his face turned black, there was a bloody smell of a man on the battlefield. Bai Lu and Shuangjiang were somewhat afraid and did not dare to go forward. "Eldest brother." Shen Miao sent Shen Xian and wife back to the room and sat opposite him. "Younger sister, I have thought and thought." Shen Xiu said, "This matter cannot be let go like this. My heart is feeling stifled." The matter that he was talking about was the matter between Shen Qing and Prince Yu. Even though Shen Miao had concealed a part of it previously, but after the returning banquet, Shen Xiu could more or less guess the ins and outs of the matter. It was because he knew that this matter was done in a vicious and absurd manner that Shen Xiu was so angry. The younger sister in their family was actually schemed against in this year and almost lost her life. If something really happened, Shen Xiu dared not imagine how much regret they would have. Chapter 189. Shen Miao looked at him, and Shen Xiu was still speaking. "The more I think, the angrier I get. Younger sister, do not stop me. Even if I have to risk this life, I will not let them have it easy." "Eldest brother." Shen Miao sighed, "I have already said that there is no evidence for this matter. Since they are doing things, naturally there would not be a single drop of water leaking out. Moreover, this involves Prince Yu of the first rank, and against Prince Yu, the imperial family would give protection. If you were to jump out, you would be standing on the opposite side of the imperial family. Do you want to kill father and mother? Xin Xiu was surprised for a moment. Xin Miao's words were too rational and made him ignore the disrespect and disdain in Xin Miao's tone towards the imperial family of Mingqi. He knew that what Xin Miao said was not wrong. In the beginning, there were many noble families that were defiled by Prince Yu, and those families did not have a reputation higher than the Xin family, but at the end they were all raised high and lowered low. Behind Prince Yu residence was the highest power in Mingqi, and to clash with it was like hitting a stone with an egg. But he still felt very depressed in his heart. He asked, "We can't just let it go like this. Eldest brother, play a game with me." Xin Miao said, "What time is it?" Xin Xiu scratched his head. "Besides, I thought you didn't like to play chess?" Xin Miao did not continue his words and set up the chessboard. She picked up the black pieces and gave the white pieces to Xin Xiu. Two armies against each other. This is your troops and this is my troops. Using the pieces as pawns, the generals and commanders will be divided. How about we fight for the world? Xin Xiu had always been passionate about the battlefield, and when he heard this, he became interested and said, "All right." Even though he was a military general, he was proficient in chess. This was because there were many similarities between playing chess and fighting a war. An exquisite chess game could sometimes reveal countless tactics. The white and black pieces fell on the chessboard, creating deep ditches. The black and white looked like a real battlefield. Xin Miao's chess moves were slow. It did not mean that her movements were slow, but it was very gentle. It was different from Shan Xiu's sonorous moves and had a kind of gentleness. This kind of feeling made Shan Xiu feel as if he was being ground by a blunt knife. No matter how Xin Xiu's white pieces threatened her, she remained motionless and maintained her own rhythm, placing the black pieces unhurriedly. Although it looked like she was at a disadvantage, the number of black pieces in her hand was not one less. Occasionally, when Xin Xiu was about to devour her black pieces, she would slyly escape. After the time it takes for a stick of incense to burn, all the white and black pieces on the table were still there. No one had gained the upper hand, and no one had taken a single piece from the other. It was just that one could clearly see that it had always been Shan Xiu's white pieces that held the initiative, and the black pieces were forced to a corner by the white pieces. If this continued, Xin Xiu would have to speed up his pace, and he would be able to nibble away Xin Miao's white pieces one by one. Xin Xiu said, "Younger sister, your method of escaping is quite good, but don't tell me you want to spend the night with me like this. I'm going to attack." "Just nice." Xin Miao smiled slightly. "I also intend to do the same." Before she finished speaking, the black piece in her hand suddenly fell to a tricky position. Xin Xiu's brows furrowed tightly. Just that one position seemed to change the situation of the entire game. He was surprised in his heart. Previously, the white pieces were pressuring step by step, but now it was like a cocoon of one's own making. He was trapped in Shan Miao's single black piece that reversed the overall situation and was unable to make a move. Following that, Shan Miao changed her previous style of only attacking and not defending, and her moves were swift and fierce. She swept away Xin Xiu's white pieces in big mouthfuls, and in less than a quarter of an hour, Xin Xiu's previously full of white pieces was only left with one. "I have lost." Xin Xiu laughed bitterly and looked at Xin Miao in amazement. "Younger sister, when did your chess skills improve to such an extent?" Using the chess game as a battlefield, he, a military general, was completely defeated by his own younger sister. It was simply a big joke if it was set out, but his heart was also very surprised. What Xin Miao displayed was not the control of the pieces, but the understanding of the overall situation. From the previous weak style to the final swift and fierce moves, her expression was calm. Perhaps how this game of chess would move was all within her grasp. Chapter 190. I do not want to play chess with eldest brother. Xin Miao shook her head and said, "Previously eldest brother asked me if we will just forget about it and play a game of chess. What does eldest brother think?" Xin Xiu was surprised for a moment and then jumped in shock. "You. The black pieces were gentle at the start and only attacked without defending, but at the end it suddenly turned around and reversed the entire situation and swallowed the opponent clean. The meaning was that Shen Miao was gentle towards Shen Qing's matter and did not resist. It was not because she planned to forget about it, but she was waiting for an opportunity, waiting for those people to deal with Shen Miao to fall into a trap of their own making, and then she would make a move and return with a full load. There are many ways to achieve one's goal. Under the light, the young female's fingers were holding a black piece. The white fingers and the black piece formed a sharp contrast, and there was a strange kind of beauty. Her voice was light. If this road does not work, then change to another road. If it is not possible to do it openly, then do it secretly. They have already blocked their own way out. Next, it is our turn to play chess. Looking at the beauty under the light, the beauty was like jade. Shen Miao could only be called a delicate and pretty beauty, but at this moment, even Shen Xiu could not help but look sideways. The young female's posture was quiet, but it seemed to contain a huge amount of energy. An exquisite heart had long hidden the chess game in her heart, and everyone had become a chess piece. Shen Xiu felt bitter in his heart. He had always felt that even though Shen Miao was not close to him, her temperament was extremely simple and one fear that she would be used by outsiders. But now he could see clearly that his younger sister had unknowingly grown up, and this kind of scheming was something that even he could not compare to. "Younger sister, I do not understand," she said. "If eldest brother believes in me, then leave the matter to me." Shen Miao said, "Prince Yu of the first rank, this kind of person would definitely find trouble with the Shen residents in the future because of this matter. We don't need this kind of enemy. Younger sister just said that Prince Yu of the first rank has the backing of the imperial family, so I cannot directly find trouble. What will younger sister do?" Shen Xiu said worriedly. "I have said earlier that if the white road does not work, then take the black road. There are thousands of roads in the world, and there will always be one that works." Shen Miao lightly said, "He, Prince Yu of the first rank, relies on the imperial family to bully others, and is just a turtle with a shell. Remove his shell and see how arrogant he can be." Under Shen Xiu's dumbstruck gaze, Shen Miao smiled gently at him. "But eldest brother, I need some money, so? Those things that His Majesty bestowed, give it to me with real gold and silver. I have use for it." Shen Xiu originally wanted to ask what Shen Miao wanted to do, but he did not know why. When he met Shen Miao's bright eyes, he could not say anything. He was the dignified Deputy General Shen and would occasionally argue with Shen Xian till his neck turned red, but as long as Shen Miao looked at him quietly, Shen Xiu felt that he would listen to everything unconditionally. Shen Xiu secretly spat at himself in his heart. He was not afraid of the enemy's generals, but afraid of a little girl? After living for so long, one would encounter all sorts of things. "Big brother?" Shen Xiu regained his senses and said, "All right, I will get someone to send some over." "Many thanks to eldest brother." Shen Miao nodded her head. "The sky is late. Eldest brother should also go and rest." "All right. There is no need to worry about the matter of Prince Yu residence. Do not tell father and mother. I will see to it." "All right." Shen Xiu scratched his head and left. When he was out of Shen Miao's room, he suddenly slapped his forehead and frowned. Damn it. There was really a feeling of being protected by one's own younger sister. In the room, Guyu carefully asked, "Young lady, is it really necessary to use so much money tomorrow?" Shen Miao's gaze froze. Guyu had not seen her own young lady with such a serious expression for a long time. Chapter 191. She sighed and said, "I'm afraid I can't take it down." On the second day, Shen Xiu really picked a few chests of real gold and silver and came to Shen Miao's courtyard. Most likely he was afraid that Shen Miao was short of money, so he took out 1,000 taels of banknotes from his bosom and gave it to Shen Miao before smiling. Younger sister's current age would require a lot of money, and one fear that this amount of monthly money is not enough. "Take these silvers. If there's anything you want to buy, just buy it. If it's not enough, just ask big brother for more." The maids sweeping the floor outside all looked at Shen Miao with envy. In the past, they felt that this fifth young lady of their family had an awkward position in the residence. She only had a good reputation and did not even know that she was being bullied. It was really pitiful. Now it seemed that they were blind. Not to mention Shen Xian and wife. Even Shan Xiu would pamper his younger sister to the skies. Shen Miao felt somewhat inexplicable as Shan Xiu's attitude was strange. She nodded her head and did not decline as she accepted the banknote. Many thanks. Shen Xiu was a little disappointed. After thinking for a while, he waved his hand and the two guards behind him immediately came forward. Shen Xiu said, "My two guards are experts in the army. I will temporarily lend them to protect you." He was worried that Prince Yu of the first rank would have some tricks up his sleeves. If it was not for Shen Miao's insistence to go out, Shen Xiu would have let Shen Miao stay in the residence. Shen Miao complied and Imo Qing also followed out. Shen Xiu smiled. "Your choice of bodyguard is really not bad." Imo Qing had already left the identity of a guard outside the Shen residence, and Shen Miao told his identity to Shen Xiu. Shen Xiu returned the indenture to Imo Qing and let Imo Qing join the Shen family's army, but these days he would be Shen Miao's guard and protect her safety. Bringing along 3 guards and 2 maids, Shen Miao finally left the main entrance of the Shen residence. Even the carriage driver was someone that Shen Xiu found who had martial arts skills. Shen Xiu's servant said, "Young master is really protective of young lady." Shen Xiu sighed. It was a pity that no matter how much he tried to protect her, she was too mature as a younger sister and did not have the sense of accomplishment as an older brother. "Let's go." He waved his hand. "Let's go back and practice our swordsmanship." Fengxian Pawn Shop was the biggest pawn shop in the Ding capital. Compared to other pawn shops, this pawn shop naturally had its own advantages. The Fengxian Pawn Shop only accepted precious items. If it was an ordinary item, it would be courteously sent out by the pawn shop assistant. The owner of the pawn shop was probably a generous person. If the item that the customer offered was really valuable, then the pawn shop would definitely offer a high price. But the Fengxian Pawn Shop still had a rule. This place only did dead pawns. Once something was pawned, there was absolutely no reason to redeem it. However, people wouldn't pawn their precious things unless they were at the end of their rope, let alone pawn them at the cost of their lives. Thus, even though the Fengxian Pawn Shop was rich and overbearing and it occupied the largest area in the Ding capital, there were only a few customers coming and going. Under such circumstances, this Fengxian Pawn Shop actually maintained for many years and did not collapse. One did not know how they maintained their livelihood. Today, in front of this Fengxian Pawn Shop, there was a horse carriage stopped. Some of the commoners who were passing by could not help but look over. Because those who came to Fengxian Pawn Shop to pawn items, most of them were desperate and were in urgent need of money, and this carriage looked rather exquisite. The coachman sitting on the carriage also did not look like an ordinary person and did not look like a poor person. And why would a rich person come here to pawn their precious things? It was indeed somewhat strange. The pawn shop's worker was a young gray-clad boy who looked smart and capable. When he saw that the horse carriage stopped in front of the door, he was slightly surprised for a moment. Following that, a few females walked out from the inside. The leading young female was most likely a young lady from a family. She was wearing a cloak and had delicate features. When she looked over, her eyes were as clear as water. A few guards and maids surrounded that young female as they walked over. The little worker went up and smiled. "Customer wants to pawn something." "There is something that needs to be pawned," that purple-clad young female said. "What item does this customer want to pawn? Can you take a look at the goods first?" The little worker smiled from ear to ear. He could see that this young female was either rich or noble, so his smile became more enthusiastic. Who knew that the other party shook her head? "I want to see your manager here." This is against the rules, customer." The little worker shook his head. He had seen a lot of people who came here to find trouble, and there was no lack of rich and powerful people, but the Fengxian Pawn Shop had never been afraid of these people. "The thing that I want to pawn is too big, and you look down on it." The young female was not angry and said lightly. When that pair of eyes looked at him, the little worker had a feeling that he had fallen into an ice cellar. Before he could speak, he heard a coquettish voice. "Who wants to see me?" A young female walked out from the back. This female was not considered beautiful, but her entire body exuded a charm that could captivate one's soul. The few guards behind Shen Miao all blushed. "This customer, do you want to see me?" That female swayed her waist as she walked over and asked with a smile. Xin Miao shook her head. I want to see your manager, Bai Xiaosheng. The female's smile stiffened in a split second. Chapter 192. Bai Xiaosheng was not a person but an industry. In one's life, there were thousands of positions. There was the imperial palace and also the common people of Jianghu. 36 professions and 72 professions. There was such a type of people who belonged to the 3 religions and 9 schools. It did not sound respectable, but there were many ways and uses. At times, the little bit of relationship between the imperial court and Jianghu was maintained by these people from the 3 religions and 9 schools. And Bai Xiaosheng was one of these industries. As the name implied, Bai Xiaosheng was somewhat similar to a detective. In hundreds of years of inheritance, this industry did not appear many times and ordinary people would not have heard of it. As for where it was and what kind of people it was, no one knew. But not knowing did not mean that it did not exist. This Fengxian pawn shop in the Ding capital was the current Bai Xiaosheng of Mingqi. That red-clad female's gaze gradually became solemn as she looked at Shen Miao, which made Mo Qing and the rest feel somewhat inexplicable. Even though they were in the army and had been in Jianghu, they really did not know what kind of thing Bai Xiaosheng was. Naturally, no matter if it was Fengxian pawn shop or Bai Xiaosheng, ordinary people would not know that the people who came here were all prepared. Young lady is... The red-clad female asked tentatively. I am here to make a transaction. Hearing that, the red-clad female's expression slightly moved and under the stunned gaze of the shop assistant, she smiled and said to Shen Miao, This young lady's things must be expensive. Since that is the case, please follow me to the back for a discussion. Mo Qing and the rest also wanted to follow but were stopped by the red-clad female. These few people need not. Young lady. Jingzhou was somewhat worried. If Shen Miao were to go in alone, perhaps she would meet with an accident. You all stay. Shen Miao said. I will return after this transaction is done. After Shen Miao and the red-clad female left, Mo Qing and the rest stayed in the outer hall. One of the guards that Shen Qiu gave to Shen Miao asked Mo Qing, Brother Mo, what is young lady doing here? After all he had killed and seen blood, he naturally had some intuition towards danger. That red-clad female's expression and the conversation between Shen Miao and Shen Miao made the few of them feel that this matter was not simple. I also do not know. Mo Qing smiled bitterly and shook his head. Looking at the corridor that led inside, he said, Young lady knows what to do. The red-clothed woman led Shen Miao through a very long corridor. At the end of the corridor was a square wooden pavilion. It had a total of 6 floors, and the top was covered with a veil. It was impossible to see what was inside, but it seemed to be very well maintained. At the very least, the wood used to make the pillars was the invaluable evening fragrant wood. There were rumors from outsiders that the Fengxian pawnshop's head was extremely wealthy, else the pawnshop business could only barely be maintained for so many years. After all, to buy such a large piece of land in the most prosperous area of the Ding capital, but to be unable to make ends meet, it was not something that everyone could afford. But Shen Miao knew that the reason why the Fengxian pawnshop was so rich and overbearing was naturally because the way they earned money was not through pawning things. What they did was a business that had no capital, and naturally it was profitable with little capital. The red-clothed female welcomed her to the lowest floor of the pavilion and found a room for her to sit down. It was a tea room, and the mahogany tables and chairs in the tea room were engraved with landscape paintings. The carvings were lifelike, and with one look, one would know that the craftsman's craftsmanship was exquisite, and of course the value was not cheap. I am called Hong Ling, the female smiled. When she smiled, the corners of her eyes were so charming that water could drip out, as if the amorous feelings were carved into her bones. She asked, How should young lady be addressed? My surname is Shen. Shen Miao said. When Shen Miao was sizing up the other party, Hong Ling was also sizing up Shen Miao. She was secretly surprised in her heart. Initially, she thought that it was some rich young lady that came to the Fengxian pawn shop to create trouble, but who knew that she actually heard Bai Xiaosheng from the other party's mouth. Knowing that this was most likely an expert, she welcomed her inside. But Hong Ling had been doing business in the Fengxian pawn shop for so many years, but it was the first time that she met such a young customer. She was not sure how much the other party knew and feared that it was her first time doing business, so she was thinking if she should brush it off. Chapter 193. So it is Shun Young Lady. Hong Ling smiled. One do not know if Shin Young Lady came to our Fengxian pawn shop to buy or sell? Shin Miao said, buy and also sell. Buying and selling at the same time. Hong Ling could not help but be surprised. It seemed that it was the first time that the few green-clad girls who were serving Hong Ling saw Hong Ling lose her composure and quietly glanced at Shin Miao. Putting away the shock in her heart, Hong Ling continued to smile. One do not know how much is the value of this transaction that Shin Young Lady is doing. Shin Miao shook her head. Hong Ling did not understand her meaning. Shin Young Lady. Shin Miao's voice was very calm. Just now I have already said that the business that I want to do is too big. He cannot see it, and you also cannot see it. If you want to talk, then look for your master. Hong Ling's throat was somewhat hoarse. For so many years, she had been good at dancing, but because the people who came here to do business all knew what Bai Xiaosheng's line of work was, they were polite and courteous to her. This was the first time that she was greeted so rudely. For a moment she instinctively wanted to get angry, but when she raised her head and met with Shan Miao's gaze, she was slightly surprised. The young female opposite did not look old and had a pair of eyes that were as clear as water, but when she looked at people, there seemed to be a little bit of coldness that burst out. That calm and quiet appearance had an inexplicable majesty. Hong Ling felt that the other party's gaze towards her did not have a trace of fear, but was simply looking down from above. Hong Ling's heart quivered, and that little bit of anger disappeared in an instant. There were so many people coming and going doing business, and she was considered to be able to see people accurately. This young lady's imposing manner was a little shocking. She did not know where it came from, but it made her feel somewhat fearful. Shin Young Lady, I am the person in charge here. If there is a transaction to be done, naturally it will be done with me, she said. Even though she felt that Shin Miao's identity was not an ordinary person, Hong Ling was not one to be frightened, and the smile on her face became even more gorgeous. No matter how much money there is, it is not like I have not seen it before. It has nothing to do with money. Shin Miao smiled gently. I have said before that you cannot make the decision for this transaction. She looked around. I came with sincerity, but you all have no sincerity. Bai Xiaosheng is only a so. Hong Ling had never met such an impolite person before. Immediately, the smile on her face became colder as she said, I feel that Miss Shun does not seem to be sincere in doing business. Since Miss Shun does not believe me, there is nothing I can do. Shin Miao stared at her for a long while before saying, as such, I will first sell you a piece of news. Hong Ling paused, only to hear the girl in front of her say calmly, back then, the Chen sisters in Yuzhou of Jiangnan went missing. How about I sell this news to you? If you think the value of this information is good, please let the shopkeeper meet me, and then we can discuss the information. Hong Ling's body shook as she looked at her in shock. After a moment, she straightened her expression and said, May I trouble young Lady Shun to wait for a moment? Hong Ling will withdraw first. Hong Ling hurriedly left, leaving behind a few green-clothed girls in the tea room looking at her curiously. Clearly, they did not know why Hong Ling would suddenly leave after hearing her words. Shin Miao looked at the teacup in her hands. The tea was made from Jun Shan's silver needles, and when it entered her mouth, the fragrance of the tea was rich. Coupled with the faint incense in the tea room, it made one feel relaxed and happy. Obviously, the owner of this place knew how to enjoy life. Bai Xiaosheng's business was in the pugilistic world's news. In the pugilistic world's news, it was divided into buying and selling news. There would be people who wanted to buy news, and there would be people who wanted to sell news. When the buyer and the seller met up, the business would be done. Bai Xiaosheng's business was like the intersection point of the beacons on the battlefield. What they did was to bring the buyer and the seller together. Chapter 194. And the news that Shun Miao wanted to sell was an unsolved case that caused a sensation in Mingqi. The wealthiest Qin family in Jiangnan's Yu province had two beauties that could topple a city. With this kind of appearance, if they were to enter the palace, they would definitely be able to fight for a position as a concubine. Not to mention that the world's beauties were painted with skin. They were all white bones. True beauties were like the most exquisite jade, and one more glance was blasphemy. The Qin family was a big family, and it was not a good thing to have these two daughters. If a female's appearance was too outstanding, and there was no ability to match their looks, one feared that it would bring disaster to the family. Fortunately, the Qin family was not only the wealthiest in Jiangnan, but also had a place in the pugilistic world. The Qin family had a wide network and had many friends in the underworld. The master of the Qin family was indebted to a sect head, thus the Qin family had a backing. Who knew that even so, when the Qin sisters were 16 years old, on the day of the Lantern Festival, they disappeared under everyone's eyes. The Qin family searched for a long time without any results. It had been 3 years since the Qin sisters disappeared. The Qin family had been spending manpower and financial resources to search for the two daughters. Even though they knew that the odds were against them, they had never given up. They even found Bai Xiaoshang and spent a lot of money to buy news. However, there was no news at all. Now that this business that had been in existence for 3 years suddenly had someone to sell, how could Hong Ling not be surprised? The remuneration that the Chun family paid was definitely not cheap. As long as Bai Xiaoshang could complete this business, even if it was divided, he would be able to get a lot of money. Business people speak according to money. Xin Miao did not believe that she could not find the master behind it. The pavilion in the Fengxian pawn shop was called Linjiang Xian Pawn Shop, and the place to do business was on the first level. From the second to the 6th level, it was used by the head of the family. At this moment in the tea room on the 6th level, there were 3 people sitting at the table. Yushu, why did you arrive so quickly? Gao Yang frowned as he looked at the person opposite, did not even greet. Opposite him sat a 17 to 18 years old youth. This youth was very cute, and was different from Xie Jingxing's burning hot sun-like handsomeness, and also different from Gao Yang's gentleness like water. This youth was like a neighbor's boy, and had an inexplicable affinity. He was wearing a lake green robe, and his smile was rather pleasing. Heard that there is a change in the Ding capital's plan, and knew that both of you would definitely need a capable general like me to help, so I specially came back to help. Hee hee. Gao Yang replied with a sneer. Ah, thank you, third brother. The youth called Yushu suddenly turned towards him and said, Yichui Lu's young lady, Xiao Yao, has recently been indifferent to me and is deeply frightened. Third older brother has always been liked by young lady. Why not teach me? This seemingly friendly and harmless young man was actually a veteran in the field of flowers. Xie Jingxing did not even look at him and said, Look at the appearance. Ah, could it be that third brother thinks that I'm not handsome? The youth was so angry that his face turned red. Back then, I was also a flower, pursued by tens of thousands of people. Could it be that third brother is jealous of me? Gao Yang could not take it anymore and pulled Ji Yushu's head to the other side. Ji Yushu, if you continue to speak like this, then go back. Ku. Yushu immediately sat up straight and said seriously, Third older brother, let us talk about the plan for this trip. He had not finished speaking when he saw a red-clad female coming up from downstairs. She had a charming appearance, but did not come in and called out from afar through the curtains, Family head. Hong Ling, Yushu guided patiently, told you many times that even though you are good-looking, it is better not to come up when us brothers are talking. Even though I dote on you, one cannot not know when to advance or retreat. He was born young and tender, as if he did not know the ways of the world, but the words he spoke was like a wily old fox. It was fortunate that Hong Ling was his subordinate, as if it was a normal young female that heard a few words from him, one feared that their face would turn red from embarrassment. Chapter 195. Master, it is a big business, and the guest insisted on seeing you. Hong Ling said. Heh. Yushu waved his hands. Which family's kid is so arrogant? My Fengxian pawn shop is not lacking in money, so who would not need his business? Do not do it, then do not do it. Let him leave. There is no door for him to see this lord. But master, that business is not an ordinary one. Already said not to do it. Fengxian pawn shop does not serve those people. Yushu reached out to eat the snacks in front of him. Hong Ling was somewhat in a difficult position, but was helpless. Just as she was about to withdraw, She heard that purple-clad youth who had been thinking about something asked, "What business is it?" Hong Ling was startled and looked at Yu Shu. She knew that the relationship between the two people in front of her and the master was not shallow, but at the end this was a confidential matter, and if it was set out like this. Yu Shu saw her hesitant gaze and slapped his thigh. "Ask you to speak, then speak. These two are my own people, and are also the shopkeepers of my Fengxian pawn shop. Their words are my words, and in the future when I am not around, they will be the shopkeepers." Before he could finish speaking, Gao Yang let out another hee. When Hong Ling saw it, she was relieved and said with a smile, "One is here to sell news." The news to sell is about the case of the Chen sisters in Jiangnan's Yu province 3 years ago. When her voice just landed, Gao Yang was the first to exclaim in surprise, "The Chen family's case. There is actually news after 3 years. This business is a little big." Correct. Xie Jingxing also spoke. The Chen family's influence in Jiangnan is vast. To accept this business, other than money, there are even more benefits. Talking about it, it must be done. Yushu scratched his head and said, "Since you all say so, then I will also go and take a look. I want to see which young fellow actually dare to make fun of this lord like this. It is very expensive for this lord to see one." Hong Ling could not help but laugh. "Not a young fellow, it is a young lady." "Young lady?" Yushu's expression changed and suddenly he smiled happily. "Is she handsome?" "He's very handsome. I can tell that he's educated and reasonable." Yushu stood up with a swoosh and dusted his robes before cupping his hands towards Xie Jingxing and Hong Ling and said with a smile, "Two older brothers, this younger brother will take a leave first." Finishing, he turned his head towards Hong Ling and said anxiously, "Where is it?" "Let's go." "Hong Ling, why didn't you say so earlier?" After both of them left, Gao Yang then sighed and said to Xie Jingxing with a face full of disappointment, "I thought that there is no use for him to come to the Ding capital. You better let him go back." "It's good to be a target," Xie Jingxing said casually. Shun Miao sat in the tea room and looked down at the floating tea leaves in the teacup. The sound of footsteps came from the door. Then, the curtain was lifted and Hong Ling walked in. She bowed slightly respectfully and welcomed the person behind her in. Shin Miao raised her head. The person who came was a youth of 17 or 18 years of age and looked to have a rare naivety. He was wearing a lake green long robe embroidered with a deer pattern. One would say that one's temperament could be seen through one's clothes, and this youth's temperament was most likely cheerful. This seemed to be in line with his age, but Shen Miao's heart had some deep thoughts about the person in front of him. To be able to manage the Fengxian pawn shop properly and also hold the lifeline of Bai Shaoshun's business in his hands, it was not to be underestimated. This youth was definitely as pure as he looked on the surface. "This one is Ji Yushu." He sat opposite Shun Miao and smiled as he cupped his hands towards Shun Miao. "Manager Ji, one do not know how old is Shin young lady." He first threw out a completely unrelated question. Shin Miao was slightly surprised for a moment before replying, 14? "Oh, that is the prime of youth." He rubbed his hands, and there was a touch of enthusiasm in his eyes. "One do not know if there is a marriage partner? Are there any sisters in the family?" He had the appearance of a lecher who was teasing good young females. Chapter 196. Hong Ling's lips twitched and turned her head away, as if she did not want to see her master's roguish behavior. Shin Miao chuckled. "It seems that Manager Ji is not here to do business." Finishing, she gestured to leave. "AI." Ji Yushu jumped in shock. "Speak properly. Shin young lady need not be anxious. Let us talk about business now." Shin Miao then stopped. Ji Yushu muttered softly, "Looks so gentle, but how can one be so fierce?" When he saw Shun Miao's sharp gaze, he immediately sat up straight and said, "Shin young lady want to sell the news of the Jiangnan's Chen family. Allow me to say one more sentence. 3 years ago, young lady was only 11. How do you know about this matter? In any case, it cannot be faked. The person who sells the news and the person who buys the news will eventually meet. Whether it is real or fake news, it is up to that side to decide. What is Manager Ji worried about?" When the words were said, Hong Ling's and Ji Yushu's expressions paused at the same time, and the gaze that looked at Shun Miao was filled with deep meaning. Hearing Shun Miao's tone, It was as if she was very familiar with all the links, but Hong Ling and Ji Yushu were certain that Shen Miao had never been here before and was an unfamiliar guest. Even if it is so. But how did Shen young lady know about the Feng Xian pawnshop's business? Ji Yushu asked again. Heard of it by chance and came over to try. Shen Miao replied him with 8 words, and it could be said to be watertight, making Ji Yushu's fake elegant smile to stiffen. Ji Yushu's eyes turned and suddenly changed the topic. Then how much does Shen young lady want to sell this news for? The person who bought the news would pay the money, a portion to the person who sold the news and a portion to Bai Xiaosheng. The amount of money needed to be discussed beforehand. After this, I still want to buy a piece of news. If Manager Ji can sell the news that I want to buy, I will not accept a single cent of the Jiangnanzhu province's Qin family's money and will even give it to you. Ji Yushu sucked in a breath of cold air. To tell the truth, the Feng Xian pawn shop had been open for so many years and many things were handed over to Hong Ling to manage, and he was just a shopkeeper who threw all the work to others. This was a profitable business, but it was also a very simple business. It relied on the connections and relationships of people from all walks of life. In terms of using one's brain, there were very few things that needed to be done. Who knew that after the conversation with Shen Miao today, he felt that the other party's words were full of twists and turns, making him somewhat overwhelmed. For example, at this moment, it was something that Ji Yushu could not understand. But he remembered that he was a businessman. So he asked, "What information does Miss Shan want to buy?" From the looks of it, his background was not simple. If we can't find it, I'm afraid the money will be delayed for many years. I don't think it's a good idea. If Manager Ji is willing, there is no need for many years and it can be done immediately. Shen Miao said, "What does this have to do with my willingness?" Ji Yushu's eyes widened. "I am not the seller. The news that I want to buy is that Prince Yu residence is plotting to rebel, but this news is not bought for myself, but for the Emperor's family of Ming Qi. Does Manager Ji understand?" Ji Yushu was first shocked by the words in her words and almost fell over as he looked at Shen Miao like he was looking at a lunatic. Hong Ling's eyes also widened as she looked at Shen Miao, calmly saying such treacherous words, and felt that her head was somewhat dizzy. The tea room was quiet for a long time until half of the incense was burnt before Ji Yushu said, "Hong Ling, bring them out." Hong Ling quickly brought the few girls out and before leaving, she glanced at Shen Miao. The latter picked up the teacup and her eyes were as calm as a pool of water. "Shen young lady," Ji Yushu said, "you are not buying information, but making information." Chapter 197. No one would directly tell the news to a middleman. Rather than saying that Shen Miao's transaction was for an outsider, it would be better to say that it was aimed at Bai Xiaosheng. She wanted to borrow the mouth of Bai Xiaosheng's business to spread some rumors, and let these rumors accidentally spread to the imperial family. Bai Xiaosheng had a lot of connections in the depths of the marketplace, and they were all like slippery loaches. When the time comes to drill into the crowd, it would be completely clean, and one would not be able to trace the source. Shen Miao was not afraid of spreading rumors to ordinary people, even if it was an official's family. But to involve the imperial family, one could not risk the Shen family. This was her plan. No matter if it is buying or selling information, riches and honor are sought in danger. Shen Miao smiled gently. "Manager Ji does not dare to do this business?" Ji Yushu scratched his head and said like a troubled youth, "I am naturally very tempted by Shen young lady's conditions, but Feng Xian pawn shop is not a decoration and is not a tool used to play games. If it is because of this one's greed that the Feng Xian pawn shop would be in trouble, it would be a disgrace to the ancestors." He put his palms together. "Currently, Bai Xiaosheng's business is already rare, and for the ancestors, I cannot take the risk. Sorry, Shen young lady." He stood up and bowed to Shen Miao. "Feng Xian pawn shop will not accept the news that Shen young lady wants to do. If the previous news that you want to sell does not change your mind, I will order people to note it down, and when the Jiangnan's Qin family has news, I will order people to inform young lady. As for where to inform, young lady can come to the pawn shop in 10 days. Finishing these words, Ji Yushu smiled at her apologetically and turned to leave. Just as his footsteps were about to step out of the tea room, Shen Miao's voice came from behind. "Manager Ji, there is not enough bargaining chips for the business." Add in the formidable great general Shen family? Do it? Ji Yushu was surprised for a moment and turned around. The purple-clothed girl lowered her head and looked at the teacup in front of her, as if she could see a flower in it. Her voice was calm, but it carried a kind of heavy tension, making the whole tea room seem abnormally cramped. If you are able to agree to do this business, the formidable great general residence in the Ding capital will henceforth become your by Xiao Shang's network. Upstairs, Gao Yang and Xie Jingxing were still drinking tea when they suddenly heard a nervous voice. Older brothers, it is not good. When they looked up, it was Ji Yushu who ran in recklessly. He lifted the bead curtain and sat in front of the table. He grabbed the blanket he had left behind, poured himself a full cup of tea, and gulped it down. Only then did he heave a sigh of relief. You scared me to death. What's wrong with you? Gao Yang joked. Weren't you in a hurry to see the beauty just now? What? Isn't she pretty? Very, very beautiful. That's strange. Gao Yang rubbed his chin and thought for a while. Could it be that the beauty is very fierce and you made her angry? For a frivolous person like Ji Yushu, everyone would shout and beat him up wherever he went. It was still better for the shy young females, but those who were slightly older would often ridicule him happily. More than very fierce, Ji Yushu said with lingering fear, simply a monster. Cough, I've been doing by Shaoxing for so many years, but this is the first time I've seen such a business. Isn't it just the matter of the Qin family in Jiangnan? Could it be that she is asking for a lot of money? Gao Yang asked. More than asking for a lot of money. It is simply a bottomless pit. What exactly is it? Xie Jingxing glanced at him. If you still do not speak properly, I will throw you out from here. Cough. This customer does not need money to sell Jiangnan's Qin family's news and said that it is to be used to buy the news. Do you know what news she wants to buy? She wants to buy news for the imperial family, and the news is that Prince Yu residence is plotting to rebel. Damn it. Ji Yushu could not help but scolded. This is using our Feng Xian pawn shop as a raft and want us to create news for her. When Gao Yang and Xie Jingxing heard it, their expressions gradually became serious. Ji Yushu loved to play around and most likely did not know the severity of it, but both of them knew the danger in Ji Yushu's words. This customer's methods were indeed too cruel. Ji Yushu was still shouting unwillingly. Based on what? Based on what I do well in Feng Xian pawn shop need to be a raft for others? In the future when something happens, she would slip away like a wisp of smoke and the one to suffer would be my pawn shop. Do you think that I am stupid? Since that is the case, you just do not agree, Gao Yang said. Hehe. Ji Yushu suddenly changed his anger and laughed twice. To think that I know how to bargain and force her to loosen her mouth and offer a big price. Guess what is it? What? Xie Jingxing asked lazily. It is the Ding capital's mighty Wu great general Shen family. To complete this business, the Shen family is one of Bai Shaoxing's connections. Seeing that I just returned and helped you all with such a big favor, quickly thank me. Ji Yushu laughed wildly. Shen family? Xie Jingxing stared at him and slowly spoke. Who is the visitor? A young lady who looks rather good. Surnamed Shen and most likely is also from the Shen family. Ji Yushu scratched his head, just very fierce and turned a blind eye to my elegance. Chapter 198. A young lady who looks rather good. Surnamed Shen and most likely is also from the Shen family. Ji Yushu scratched his head, just very fierce and turned a blind eye to my elegance. When the words were spoken, the tea room fell into a strange silence. After a moment, Gao Yang then looked at Xie Jingxing with a smile. I roughly know who it is. This Shen family's young lady is somewhat powerful. Even though the smile was gentle, there was some sharpness in the tone. Actually, I also find it strange. Ji Yushu shuddered and scratched his head. Just now when she came over, I took a careful look. It was not like it was the first time she came to Bai Xiaopao to do business. I asked Hong Ling and had never seen her before. Our business is secretive, and other than those few families of officials in the Ding capital, no one else knows about it. How did she know? This young lady is not simple. Gao Yang pondered. I originally thought that the Ding capital Shen family was brainless fat meat that would be swallowed by others sooner or later. Now it seems that the water is deeper than imagined. He swept a glance at Xie Jingxing and found that the latter was deep in thought. What do you think? Xie Jingxing raised his head and looked at Ji Yushu. Did you agree to her conditions? Such a big matter. I need to discuss it with you all. Ji Yushu ate a pastry in one mouthful, but I estimate that the Shen family has a large business and the military strength in their hands is not weak. If what that young lady of the Shen family said is true, in the future it would be much easier for third older brother to plan. After all, she does not know that our Feng Xian pawn shop is privately third older brother's business. When the sandpiper and clam fight, the fisherman benefits. That young lady surnamed Shun most likely did not know that the promise that she made would ultimately benefit Xie Jingxing. However, one could not blame her, as even Hong Ling, who had been the steward of the Feng Xian pawn shop for many years, did not know about the powerful relationship involved. Be that as it may, Gao Yang muttered to himself, this gamble is a little too big. The news that she wants to create would attract the imperial family's attention. We must be careful in our actions, as it would not be worth the loss if there were any mistakes. As for the Shen family or the Shen family, the initial plan did not have the Shen family's power, so there is no need to be so concerned. What you said is also reasonable. Ji Yushu nodded his head and looked at Xie Jingxing, but in the end it is still third older brother who makes the decision. You agreed to her conditions. When Xie Jingxing spoke, Gao Yang frowned. Why are you making such a hasty decision? Since the Shen family has become a variable, it does not mean that they will not be useful in the future. It could be used to deal with some people. As for the news that she wants to create, it is directed at Prince Yu residence. Xie Jingxing raised his eyebrows. Just nice. We do not need to take action to tidy up, and it would save us trouble. Hearing his words, the others finally remembered. Ji Yushu clapped his hands. That's right. I almost forgot. She wanted to spread the news of Prince Yu residence rebelling. This is directed at Prince Yu residence. Is there enmity between Prince Yu residence and the Shen family? Ji Yushu had just returned to the Ding capital and usually did not pay attention to the affairs between the young ladies of official families. Thus he was not clear about all these and was somewhat inexplicable. Gao Yang's heart was clear. He knew of the grudges between Shen Miao and Prince Yu and could not help but cast a sidelong glance. If it was an ordinary female who encountered such a matter, they would be afraid of the power of Prince Yu residence, but not only was Shen Miao not afraid, she was even waiting for an opportunity to counterattack. She was very smart. Since Prince Yu residence had the support of the imperial family, she would first alienate the imperial family. If the imperial family had doubts about Prince Yu, naturally the life-saving talisman behind Prince Yu residence would not be of any use. But even so, what else could she do? Accept this business, Xie Jingxing said, quickly informed the Jiangnan's Chen family. Chapter 199. Don't worry, I've already asked Hong Ling to send a letter to Yuzhou. The Chen family's case has been delayed for 3 years, but I don't know if the news about the young lady from the Shen family is true or false. After all, back then, the Chen family had tried everything they could to no avail, so how could a little girl know about it? If her news is false, one estimate that the Chen family would not let her have a good time. Ji Yushu said vaguely with his mouth stuffed with snacks. Since she came to sell the news, it must be true. Xie Jingxing frowned. But there is still something wrong with this matter. Are you a good-for-nothing? Gao Yang looked at Ji Yushu wolfing down his food and could not help but shake his head. Could it be that you, a shopkeeper of Feng Xian pawn shop, have never eaten your fill? Ji Yushu stretched out a finger and shook it. How would the dim sum of other places be as good as third older brother's chef? Last time, I brought third brother's chef's desserts to Lady Xiaoyao, and Lady Xiaoyao actually smiled at me. It can be seen that. He picked up a piece of dessert and waved it in front of Gao Yang. There's something different about you. Gao Yang was too lazy to talk to him, but suddenly he saw Ji Yushu's expression congealed as he thought of something and took out a banknote from his bosom. Speaking of which, that Shan family's young lady finally gave me 1,000 silver to buy a piece of news. What news? Xie Jingxing and Gao Yang looked at him at the same time. Said to look for a person, a young lady called Lu Ying. Said to be. Most likely a young lady from a brothel and is in the Ding capital, so that I must find her. He asked curiously, why is she looking for a young lady from a brothel? Could it be that you also like beauties like me? Gao Yang and Xie Jingxing looked at each other. The former was puzzled and the latter only shook his head slightly. When she was sent out by Hong Ling, Imo Qing and the rest then heaved a sigh of relief when they saw that she was safe and sound. Xin Miao had stayed inside for too long, and if she had stayed a moment longer, one feared that the few of them would have rushed in to snatch her away. Before Xin Xiu left, he exhorted over and over again that Xin Miao had gotten into trouble and must be careful on the road. If he really lost Xin Miao, Xin Xiu would turn around and kill a few people. Hong Ling politely smiled at Xin Miao. Xin young lady can come back here 10 days later. Thank you, Manager Hong. Xin Miao replied softly. It was the little shop assistant at the door who could not help but take a few more glances at Xin Miao. It was probably the first time that he saw Hong Ling being so respectful to someone. After Xin Miao and entourage boarded the horse carriage and left, the shop assistant could not help but ask Hong Ling, "Steward, what is the background of that young lady?" "Mind your own business." Hong Ling lightly patted his head and thought for a moment before saying, "Next time you see this Xin young lady, speak sweetly. That is not a simple person." The waiter hurriedly agreed. Hong Ling looked at the departing figure of the carriage and sighed inwardly. There were indeed many talented people in the Ding capital, and now even a young lady could quietly plan such a big matter. Compared to the head of one's own family, she did not seem to lose out much. In the carriage, Shun Miao was in deep thoughts, and one did not know what she was thinking about. Jingzhe and Guyu were afraid of disturbing her thoughts and did not speak at all. Actually, they did not know what business Xin Miao was doing today. It was obviously a pawn shop, but they did not know what was being pawned. But since Shun Miao did not say anything, the two maids would not talk about it. But when they passed by a place, Guyu smiled. In front is Guang Fuzhai. One have not gone out for a long time. Why not let this servant go and buy some Guang Fuzhai snacks? Guang Fuzhai snacks had always been in high demand, and now that it was not the most crowded time, there was no harm in buying some. Even though Xin Miao did not like to eat, Luo Shuiyin and Xin Xiu liked to eat. Xin Miao nodded her head. You go? Chapter 200. Guyu then jumped down the carriage and went to Guang Fuzhai first. Imo Qing and the rest surrounded the carriage. The few of them were tall and strong and were somewhat eye-catching. In a moment, everyone who passed by would take a few glances. Xin Miao opened the curtain to get some fresh air, but her eyes were attracted by one person. That person most likely just came out from Guang Fuzhai, as he was carrying a bag of snacks in his hands. Coincidentally, his eyes met with Shun Miao in the air, and could not help but be slightly startled. It was Pei Lang. Xin Miao had not been to Guangwentang for a long time. She did not want to gain the reputation of a talented female, and also did not want to use this to obtain scholarly honors. These days she was busy with her own matters and had forgotten about this. She looked at Pei Lang and suddenly smiled and nodded her head at him in the carriage. Pei Lang was somewhat stunned for a moment. In fact, Shun Miao was his student. Ming Qi still valued the character of respecting one's teacher. Xie Jingxing was out of line, but as long as one was a student, one would always be polite to one's teacher. But Xin Miao's nod just now gave Pei Lang an illusion that he had to look up to Xin Miao, and Xin Miao was a head taller than him. Without waiting for him to react, Shun Miao had already put down the curtain. Imo Qing and the rest who were in the carriage noticed his gaze and looked at him with some vigilance. Pei Lang stood rooted to the ground. Such a rude action would have enraged a person like him, who was innately arrogant to the bone. But he did not know why, other than not knowing whether to laugh or cry. He could not feel any other emotions. Most likely it was because of Shun Miao's strong performance these days that he felt that if Shun Miao behaved like those students and acted obediently, he would not be used to it. Shaking his head, Pei Lang could only leave. Feeling that the gaze outside the carriage had left, Shun Miao's eyes looked down at her sleeves. Towards Pei Lang, her feelings were very complicated. She knew that Pei Lang was indifferent towards the matter of Fu Xiuyi treating Wan Yu and Fu Mingji, but she also knew that Pei Lang was only a person who was loyal to the ruler. The grudges from the previous lifetime had been settled, and since there was still a need for Pei Lang in this lifetime, she should not be entangled in this matter. It was just that her heart was somewhat uncomfortable. Just as she was thinking, Guyu had already returned from buying snacks. By the time they returned to the Shun residence, it was still not late and Shen Xiao was also staying in the western courtyard. Xin Miao planned to send some snacks to Shen Xiao. Just as they walked to the main hall, they coincidentally met Ren Wanyun supporting Shan Qing out. Ren Wanyun's gaze towards Shen Miao was like a knife and Shan Qing's eyes were incomparably venomous. Even Gu Yu and Jing Zhe could not help but shiver, and both of them protected Shen Miao behind them. Fifth Lady had not gone to greet old foreign these days. Ren Wanyun brought up another topic. Could it be that she plans to be an unfilial descendant? Shen Miao swept a glance at her. Ren Wanyun was now like a mad dog, biting whoever she caught. On one side, she was afraid of Shen Xian and Luo Shuiyan, but at the same time, she was not willing to let Shen Qingbai suffer for nothing, so she could only do some small actions that did not hurt or itch. However, Shen Miao was after all not someone who was scared. She was not afraid of reputation at all. She looked at Shen Qing with a slight smile. Second Shen still has the energy to manage my matters, so she is not afraid of eldest sister's heart being hurt. The Empress's bestowal of marriage came in a rush, as she will be entering the Wang residence next month. Second Shen has to teach eldest sister some things. After all, the marriage is not from an ordinary family, but the residence of a prince of first rank. Finishing, she did not even turn her head back as she brought Jingzhe and Guyu away. Ren Wanyun was so angry that her entire body was trembling. These days, the angrier she was, the more she felt that her mind was in a mess. She did not even have the time to bother about that Wan Yinyang that Shen Gue doted on. Wan Yinyang gave birth to Shen Dongling, who was delicate and helpless in the past, and would often cook for Shen Gue to eat. With Shen Qing as a foil, she became more well-behaved. With that Wan Yinyang coaxing Shen Gue until he was docile, Ren Wanyun and Shen Qing were getting worse by the day. Chapter 201. And all of this was because of Shen Miao. Otherwise, with Ren Wanyun's methods, how would Wan Yinyang, who was previously subdued by her, be so arrogant today? Mother, Shen Qing, who was by the side, pulled her hand. These days she had suffered a lot of cold eyes and her previous arrogant and impetuous temperament had converged a lot. The hatred in her eyes did not diminish as she gritted her teeth. Do not worry. Endure it. Wait till I enter the residence of the Prince of First Rank. Even if I have to risk this life, I will let Prince Yu take action against Shen Miao. I will definitely not let her live well. Because Shen Qing was already pregnant, the Empress's bestowal of marriage was set for next month, so that it would not be easy to clean up after a long time. In such a short period of time, and it was an imperial edict, Ren Wanyun really could not do anything and could only watch as Shen Qing jumped into the fire pit. Qinger need not be afraid, Ren Wanyun said. Your older brother will be back soon. Yuan is the smartest, and when he returns, he would definitely think of ways to let that little slut's reputation be ruined. Shen Yuan would also rush back to participate in Shen Qing's marriage. Ren Wanyun's eyes flashed. Now she was isolated and helpless, and if it was not for Shen Yuanbo, who followed her words to please old foreign, that old woman would not help her. Shen Miao returned to the western courtyard and unexpectedly saw Shen Xiao waiting for her in the courtyard. Seeing her return, Shen Xiao then gave a sigh of relief and looked at her up and down. Why were you gone for so long? One thought that something happened. Under the sun of heaven's feet in broad daylight, one would be a fool if one were to make a move. Shen Miao handed the snacks to him. Bought it when I returned. This is for you. Shen Xiao was surprised for a moment and was somewhat touched as he received it. After returning this time, Shen Miao's change in attitude towards him made him pleasantly surprised. Why are father and mother not around? Shen Miao asked. Just returned to the capital and socialized with colleagues. Shen Xiao looked around and said, Younger sister, you are not around today, and these few days father had some conflicts with second and third Shu. Just now old foreign reprimanded father severely. Father had a conflict with second and third Shu? Shen Xiao looked at Shen Miao's expression and thought about it before saying, younger sister. You also know that because of the matter in the ancestral hall, father and mother were somewhat dissatisfied with second and third Shu. Naturally, he didn't pay attention to them. Old madam was probably anxious, so she reprimanded father. Speaking till here, Shunshio's face could not help but reveal a look of injustice. Old foreign's heart is too biased. What wrong did father do? Second uncle and third uncle did not take good care of you in the Fu. Even I am angry, not to mention father. Shinshio did not call her grandmother, but old foreign. It was obvious that he had some complaints about old Shin foreign. After saying this, Shinshio could not help but look at Shin Miao's expression. Shin Miao was after all raised up by old Shin foreign, and every time she returned, she would be very respectful to old Shin foreign. Shinshio said these words impulsively as he was not sure if Shin Miao would be disgusted or not. There is a difference in closeness, and after all, it is not one's own blood that flows. Shin Miao said indifferently, naturally there will be favoritism. Shinshio seemed to be happy that he had found an ally. That's right. Father is filial to her because of grandfather. You have done enough for so many years. You actually scolded father for being unfilial. Scolding father is not only because of second and third Shu's matters. Shin Miao said, one fear that this time father did not hand over the money that his majesty bestowed. Old Shun foreign loved money like her life, and this time Shin Xian kept the reward for himself due to his anger. In addition, Shan Miao also did not mention to send the money over. After a long time, old Shan foreign naturally could not sit still and thickened her face to find fault. This is really... Shinshio seemed to want to say something, but felt that it was not good to say it in front of his younger sister, and endured it. So what about it? Father's things can be given to whoever one wants to. Chapter 202. That's right. So let her scold as she pleases. As long as one's face is acceptable and ignore her, she would not be able to play any tricks. It is just that father's temperament is too straightforward, and some matters must be tolerated on the surface. When the time comes, there will naturally be a chance to vent. Shinshio felt that Shun Miao's words were somewhat strange, but faintly felt something. He smiled. Not seeing for a year, younger sister's temperament has become much stronger. Shin Miao declined to comment. Seeing that Shinshio had already opened the paper bag, he picked up a large piece of dim sum and threw it into his mouth. After chewing a few times, she said, the dim sum in the Ding capital is just delicious. We are in the northwest desert, so how would there be such exquisite things? Shin Miao quietly watched him eat, and after a moment, she softly asked, what does eldest brother think of loyalty? Loyalty? Shun Shio did not even raise his head. Naturally, it is to be loyal to the monarch and serve the country, to kill the foreign enemies with iron blood, to be a pillar of the country. Finishing, he then asked Shin Miao, why does younger sister ask this? Nothing. Shin Miao shook her head and softly said, you eat? In the depths of her eyes, there was a flash of sadness. The first snow had cleared up, and it had been snowing for the entire night in the Ding capital. When the sunlight shone in, the ice crystals under the eaves shone brightly, making it look very beautiful. There were naughty children on the streets who squatted down to grab a handful of snow and made a snowball before throwing it at each other to play. The nearer it was to the end of the year, the livelier the Ding capital became. It was as if all the hard work throughout the year was at the end of the year, bearing rich fruits. On the eaves of the Feng Xian pawn shop, there was a row of neatly hung red lanterns, but it was not an ordinary red lantern. One did not know what material was used to make the lanterns, but it seemed to be mixed with golden yarn. It was actually sparkling under the sunlight, and the pendant at the bottom of the lantern was also a sparkling glass bead that sparkled beautifully with the ice crystals. Only those who were rich and overbearing would do such a thing. There were guards guarding outside. Otherwise, there would be an endless stream of people coming to steal the lanterns. The little shop assistant in plain clothes welcomed the guests with a face full of smiles. There were usually very few people who came to Feng Xian pawn shop to do business, and the shop assistants usually loved to goof off, but today he was unusually energetic, as if he was sure that there would be guests coming. Behind the long corridor of the Feng Xian pawn shop, in another world, On the first floor of the Marquis of Lin in the tea room, the red-clad female had a charming smile as she personally carried the refreshments in and delivered it to the inside before saying with a smile, "The chef made the refreshments. Everyone please have a taste." As she spoke, she leisurely retreated. There were 3 people sitting in the tea room. One of them was wearing a light green robe, and his smile was warm and friendly. The 2 people in front of him seemed to be in their 20s, and they looked very similar. Obviously, they were a pair of brothers. Both of them had thick eyebrows and big eyes, with swords hanging from their waists, giving them the air of Jianghu. At this moment, the older of the 2 brothers said, "Shopkeeper Ji, could it be that the person who bought the information is plotting against us? Why hasn't he appeared yet?" Ji Yushu smiled. "Brother Chen need not be anxious. That day I had an agreement with her that we would meet here today, but did not mention the time. Anyhow, it will be today, and it will not be too late. Hope that both of you will be more tolerant." Finishing, he cursed the 2 people in front of him in his heart, who would come to do business so early in the morning when the sky had just brightened. He was still blinded, and if it was not because of the Jiangnan's Qin family's face, he would have directly sent them away. To be honest, the eldest Qin young master Qin Yushan said, "When us 2 brothers received the news, it should have taken more than half a month to reach the Ding capital, but we rushed on without stopping and a few horses died from exhaustion." It was nothing more than news of the 2 younger sisters. Shopkeeper Ji also know that in these 3 years, we have spent a lot of energy to find the younger sisters, but there was no news at all. Now that there are finally some signs, naturally we are anxious. One hope that Shopkeeper Ji will not laugh at us. This eldest Qin young master could speak well, and most likely he saw that Ji Yushu was somewhat unhappy with the 2 of them coming too early, so he half explained and half apologized. Chapter 203. Ji Yushu's heart felt more comfortable and his smile became more sincere as he smiled. "These few years I have been helping you all to pay attention to the news, and now that there is some progress, my heart is also very comforted. It is actually nothing much for us to wait for him here." Second Qin young master Qin Yuhai was younger and spoke with more youthful vigor. "As long as the news is true, what harm is there in waiting for half a month, but if it is false? To play tricks on our Jiangnan's Qin family like this, do not blame us brothers for being impolite." Ji Yushu's heart that had just calmed down suddenly became unhappy again. He did not care if the Chen brothers were to be unreasonable, but to be unreasonable in his territory, it really made him extremely unhappy. His smile did not change, but his tone became colder. "My Feng Xian pawn shop only deals with the buying and selling of news. If this business is successful, then it is the matter of exchanging money, but if it is not successful, then we will part ways. I do not care what Brother Chen wants to do, but my Feng Xian pawn shop is a clean place to do business and cannot afford trouble." Chen Yushan paused and glared fiercely at his younger brother. He naturally knew that this seemingly friendly and harmless youth's means were powerful and would not be as simple as what he showed at the moment. Chen Yuhai saw his older brother's expression and knew that he had said the wrong words, so he did not continue for a moment. The atmosphere became silent. After a long while, there were footsteps at the door, and it was Hong Ling who came forward with a smile to open the beaded curtain and said to Ji Yushu, "Manager, a guest is here." The Chen brothers subconsciously looked towards the door and saw a purple-clad young female walking out from behind Hong Ling. This young female looked delicate and cute, and looked to be around 13 or 14 years of age. One did not know why, but her brows were as calm as water, and she seemed to be much older. For a moment, it made one somewhat confused. She opened the curtain and sat down on the empty chair before nodding her head to Ji Yushu. "Manager Ji?" "This young lady." Qin Yushan opened his mouth with difficulty and asked, "Is the person who sells the news?" Hong Ling smiled and retreated, leaving only the Chen brothers, Shen Miao and Ji Yushu in the tea room. Shen Miao said, "Correct." Qin Yuhai's expression changed and said with a sneer, "Young lady, how old were you 3 years ago? Could it be that you are deliberately playing with the both of us? There are many ways to get the news. Maybe I didn't see it with my own eyes, or maybe I didn't know about it 3 years ago. Doing business is all about results. Moreover, a mere Qin family really isn't worth playing with." With a pu sound, Ji Yushu could not help but laugh out. Just as he laughed, He saw Chen Yuhai's ugly expression and quickly said seriously, "Shen young lady is right. Doing business is about the result, and as for the process, it is not important." "Really?" Chen Yuhai looked at Shin Miao and said in a lukewarm tone, "One do not know if this Shin young lady can guarantee that the news is true. It's true that doing business requires results, so if the results are true, we brothers will naturally reward you handsomely. But if it doesn't work, do you know what the consequences will be?" As he finished speaking, Chen Yuhai's tone suddenly became gloomy. Those who roamed the Jianghu were all somewhat fierce. The ferocity that erupted in that instant was enough to frighten ordinary people, at least enough to frighten a little girl. In the silence, Shun Miao stared at him without blinking, and there was not a trace of fluctuation in her expression. Her calm appearance made Chen Yuhai seem like an unreasonable person. Ji Yushu wanted to laugh, but could not, and could only hold it in. Chen Yushan, who had been silent, finally spoke. "Shen young lady, my younger brother is somewhat impetuous. I apologize on his behalf. Both of us are sincerely here to buy this news, and if young lady's news is true, we will definitely offer 10,000 gold as thanks." "There is no need for 10,000 gold," Shen Miao said. "It is just that the Chun family of Jiangnan has many connections, and I only want to form good karma. Perhaps in the future there will be difficulties, and if there is anything that requires the Chen family's help, one hope that both of you can take care of me on the account of this news." She was facing two males who were much older and more knowledgeable than her, but her words were not at a disadvantage. She was methodical and had some Jianghu heroism, which made Chen Yushan to look at her more highly and cupped his hands in acknowledgement. But one did not know that Ji Yushu had already scolded Shen Miao as a profiteer in his heart. One had to know that the money from the sale of this news would all be given to the Fengxian pawn shop, but Shen Miao took the initiative to say that she would give less money. Was this not changing the method to let the Fengxian pawn shop earn less? "You better talk about that news." Chen Yuhai was somewhat anxious. Shen Miao glanced at him and said, "The Chen family's sisters went missing in Jiangnanzhou province. In fact, they were abducted, and the mastermind who abducted the two sisters was His Majesty's twin brother, Prince Yu of the first rank." When the words were spoken, the three people in the tea room were silent. In another secret room that was next to the tea room, the two people in the room were also startled. The white-clad gentleman even cried out involuntarily, "Prince Yu of the first rank?" The purple-clad youth rubbed the jade cup in his hands and suddenly smiled before speaking word by word. "Interesting." Chapter 204. In the tea room, Ji Yushu's heart had a moment of enlightenment. Previously, Shen Miao said that she wanted to create news, but the news was targeted at Prince Yu residence. At this moment, the news that was sold to the Chen family was also related to Prince Yu residence. Wasn't it to incur hatred for Prince Yu residence? It seemed that what Gao Yang said was indeed correct. The Shen family and Prince Yu residence had a deep hatred, and this person set up a trap with Prince Yu residence, waiting for Prince Yu residence to stumble. But thinking about it, Ji Yushu was somewhat depressed. Those who came to buy Shaosheng to do business had always been sincere in buying and selling information and were deeply grateful to this place that could provide information. How would it be like Shen Miao in front of him, who directly used Bai Shaosheng as a tool, using Bai Shaosheng to rope in the Qin family and use Bai Shaosheng to deal with Prince Yu residents? But Ji Yushu pondered in his heart. Even if the Qin family of Jiangnan was a big family, Prince Yu residents had a fierce reputation for so many years, and there was also the imperial family's protection. Unless it was a blood feud, who would rush in upon seeing danger? Is what Shen young lady said the truth? Chun Yushan's voice was hoarse. Prince Yu's ferocious and lascivious reputation was known by the entire court, and if the Chen sisters were to fall into his hands, one could imagine the outcome. "I have no need to lie to you, but how can you prove that what you said is true?" Chen Yuhai suddenly shouted out agitatedly. Most likely it was because he could not believe it after hearing the news, or because he did not dare to believe it. He was especially fierce towards Shen Miao. The Chen sisters are a pair of beauties, but were protected by the Chun family impenetrably. Prince Yu had always loved excitement and spent a lot of effort to kidnap the Chun sisters. Afterwards, they were brought to the Ding capital overnight, and when the Chun family was still searching for the sisters' whereabouts in Yu province, The Chen sisters had already reached Prince Yu residence. Speaking till here, Shun Miao's voice paused for a moment before continuing. Afterwards, Prince Yu's methods of torturing females were terrible, and the Chen sisters wanted to commit suicide, but were stopped by Prince Yu. Afterwards, the older sister flattered and hoped to let the younger sister escape, but in fact, Prince Yu knew of their plans and pretended not to know. After that, the older sister was bestowed to Prince Yu's subordinates and was tortured and beaten to death. The younger sister was humiliated on the way and was blinded and found a place to do night incense work, always hoping to survive because this was the life that the older sister had fought for. It is just that. Shun Miao sighed softly. She actually never walked out of the doors of Prince Yu residence. The so-called night-scented work and the surrounding neighbors were all arranged by Prince Yu in order to play with the Chen family's younger sister and see her living in the swamp with hope. Her voice was calm and cool, with only a hint of regret at the end, but it sent chills down one's spine. Ji Yushu was also extremely shocked. Even though he knew of Prince Yu's absurd and terrifying methods of torturing females, it was the first time he heard someone talk about it in such detail. It was to say it, but it was easy to kill. Li Yong. You. As for that Chen sister, she thought that she had escaped and was living with hope, hoping that one day she would be able to take revenge and find her family. But she did not know that the hope was already in someone's hands, and everything she did was just a playful method in Prince Yu's eyes. Such words made the Chen brothers silent. Chen Yuhai slowly stretched out his hand and clutched his head and suddenly howled in pain. His voice was like a wounded beast, making one to cry. Ji Yushu could not help but cast a sympathetic look. Xin Miao looked at him and sighed in her heart. The first half of the Chen sisters' lives were also the pearls in the palm of one's hands, living a carefree life, and could have become the happiest female in the world. But the lower half of the body was so miserable and was worse than an ordinary female. It was a sin to be too beautiful, but what crime did the Chen sisters commit? Xin young lady. Chen Yushan was more steady than Chen Yuhai, but even so, his voice was trembling. How to prove that what Xin young lady said is the truth? All these are after all Shun young lady's side of the story. No matter how steady a person was, when they heard news that they were not willing to believe, they would most likely be like Chen Yushan and keep escaping, thinking that they would not have to face it. Chapter 205. Very simple. The Chen family's younger sister is still alive, and Prince Yu residence has an impenetrable defense. If you rashly go in like this, one fear that you will beat the grass and alert the snake. If you want to know if my words are true, you can go to Prince Yu residence and kidnap one of the purchasing servants and ask if there is a female that sells night incense in his residence. You will know after asking your own younger sister. As soon as he said this, the two Chen brothers swayed, unable to conceal the pain on their faces. Ji Yushu sighed in his heart. Xin Miao spoke in such detail and with such certainty, this news was most likely true. You. Chen Yuhai stared at Xin Miao and suddenly said, "Since you know about this matter, why did you not save her? You watched helplessly as she fell into the pit of fire, yet you refused to help her. Instead, you calmly came here to trade information. You." He slammed the table. "You're so heartless." Yuhai. Chen Yushan reprimanded him in a low voice and cupped his fists towards Xin Miao. "Sorry, Xin young lady. My second younger brother is too sad and hope that Xin young lady does not mind." Even though his words were polite, the trace of complaint in his eyes towards Shun Miao was seen by Shun Miao. After a moment of silence, Xin Miao did not get angry but instead laughed and looked at Chen Yuhai. "How does Gentleman Chan think I should help? I'm just a defenseless girl. What ability do I have to save her from the fiery pit? Would she disregard her own safety and sneak into the prince's residence? Or would she give up her life to fight for an opportunity like her sister? Today, I will say that if that person is my biological sister, I can save her. But to me, she is just a stranger. Dare I ask, young Master Chun, would you risk your life for a stranger? If you dare, I will respect you as a man. It's a pity that I'm such a cowardly and narrow-minded woman. Why should I be a good person?" Her words were said so quickly and anxiously that the Chen brothers were actually rendered speechless by her, and Ji Yushu's mouth was wide open. He did not know why, but he felt that Xin Miao was suddenly angry just now. Xin Miao's words were also full of sarcasm. That's right. If the world was filled with good people who were willing to risk their lives for strangers, then the world would not be so difficult. Xin Miao was just a little female, so what ability did she have to help the Chen sisters to escape? Xin Miao coldly looked at the two brothers opposite her. Just now her emotions were somewhat out of control. It was just that now what she hated the most was other people using righteousness to threaten her. In the beginning, for the common people of Ming Qi and for Fu Xiu Yi, she volunteered to be a hostage in the Qin country, and when she returned to the palace, what awaited her was the indifference of the emperor. Her Xin family, for the righteousness of the country, assisted the emperor, and what she received was the execution of the entire family. Why did they have to pay for everything? Why did she have to be the savior? The Chen sisters were indeed very pitiful. When she was banished to the cold palace and had nowhere to go, she was also pitiful when she couldn't even protect her children. But who reached out to help her? In this world, no matter how difficult life was, one had to walk on their own. No one should save others. Chen Yuhai was silent for a long time before speaking to Xin Miao. Just now my words were too heavy. Xin young lady, I am sorry. Xin Miao calmed down her emotions and said, My news ends here. We two brothers believe Miss Shan's words. Chen Yushan said, But the most urgent matter is to first investigate the whereabouts of my younger sister. If my younger sister is found, the Chen family will definitely reward with 10,000 gold. I have already said before that there is no need for 10,000 gold and only need to form good karma. Xin Miao said, But I have a sentence that I do not know if both of you are willing to hear. One would like to hear the details. Chen Yushan cupped his hands. Prince Yu of the first rank haggles over every penny and is narrow-minded. If anyone provokes him, he would definitely retaliate. The Qin family has a big business, but when compared to the imperial family, they are still a head shorter. One think that both of you not only want to rescue the Chan sisters, but also want to take revenge for the Chan sisters. You're tuning in to the Romance Rendezvous YouTube channel. We're so grateful for your support, and don't forget to subscribe to join us on this incredible journey through captivating stories. Your generosity through donations truly makes a world of difference, as it's the primary source of revenue that allows me to expand and enhance this channel for you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a part of this adventure.